Okay, we're going to be working on an old stereo console from the 70s. It's an Elektra brand, which is an old Mexican electronics brand. I don't think it's the same one as the German brand that made radios. From what I know, it's actually still around, but they don't make electronics anymore. It's actually like a furniture store. And back in the 40s, they started making radios and stuff. They no longer make electronics, but they still, sell furniture and other crap. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting construction. They had their own thing going on. As ICs are socketed, which is interesting. All the components are Mexican brands that no longer exist because all that stuff died out in the late 70s, early 80s. There's a couple foreign brands, but still made in Mexico. And yeah, pretty interesting. Kind of like seeing this old Mexican-made stuff. For some reason, you always see these orange and blue capacitors in these old electronics. So yeah, something wrong with the audio amp. Only one channel works, which is the left channel. You can hear the left channel working. We're facing looking at the back of the thing, so it's inverse. So if I touch the left channel, you can hear it buzzing. If I touch the right channel, nothing happens. If I swap the speaker connections, the problem changes changes location or whatever. So now you can hear audio coming out of this one. No audio coming out of this one. You can hear it humming though, so it's somewhat active. The working channel gets very hot. I can't keep my hand on it too long. Non-working channel is also kind of warm. I would expect it to be cooler since it's not really working. Here's a bias adjustment pot, so I assume bias is going to have something to do with the issue. Someone butchered it. You can see some loose wires and some nasty patchwork. And yeah, so interesting old thing. I wish I knew more about the company, but there isn't much info out there. Also don't have any service info. So yeah. Here's a tour of what this thing actually looks like on the front. I really like the design. It's been very well taken care of. You can see some storage room for records and stuff. Very glossy still, which is really nice. Record player, some lights, and the tape player. Pretty cool. Still in very good shape. You can see somebody actually had made a bridge here, which I cut off between those two speakers. So that probably might have been a hacked solution to the problem it has. So here's a chassis out of that stereo console. So yeah, it's got a lot of weird, interesting little parts. Most of them are weird Mexican brands that don't exist anymore, except this big one here. That's a Siemens made in Brazil. I don't know if you can see that. This camera is kind of crappy. I think a few of these are Siemens, but they're all, national made stuff. But anyway, yeah, the amplifier is kind of a weird thing. I hadn't really encountered one of these before. So basically what it is I always want to say Quasimodo, but it's a quasi-complementary amplifier. Because basically when I looked at this, I was expecting a push-pull type of thing where there's an NPN and a PNP transistor per channel output. And this is just 4 NPN transistors, 2 per channel. And so it turns out this is a quasi-complementary amplifier, which apparently was very common in the 70s, I guess, because back then it was difficult to obtain PNP transistors that were suited for this kind of application. So instead they used 2 NPN for the power output, and the NPN that's tied to ground, because this is also a single rail, NPN that's tied to ground is driven by a PNP transistor. So it's a little bit weird, never seen that before. This is split right in half. It's actually like perfectly symmetrical. when you look at it from the bottom, it's actually like perfectly symmetrical. It's like a mirror image. And I mean, that's kind of expected with a stereo amplifier, but this is kind of like almost a perfect mirror type of thing. So yeah, identical things on both sides, and the plan was to use the working side as a model to know what should be going on in the non-working side, but it's got some weird problems, I think. So yeah, uh, split it down to half here. This transistor hooks up to the positive of the power supply. Its collector hooks up to the positive of the power supply. And then its emitter goes through this resistor here. That resistor hooks up to this other resistor here. And that hooks up to the collector of the ground side transistor, and its emitter goes to ground. The junction between these two resistors hooks up to the coupling cap to the speaker, which the fact that there was coupling cap to the speakers is also kind of a sign that this isn't, a usual type of push-pull amplifier, because they're obviously trying to get some DC out of the way. So I'm guessing it sort of works similar to like a Class B amplifier. I'm not really sure. Like I said, I mean, I'm not a super expert on this kind of stuff, and I don't really know. But I mean, I looked this up online because I hadn't encountered this before, and the stuff I saw online looks a lot like this. I mean, I'm sort of figuring out where everything is on this thing. For example, biasing is done with these 3 diodes here. They're in series. This is also an adjustment for that, for the current through the diodes. Sets up the idle current. Like I said, they drive the ground side NPN transistor with a PNP, and this is it right here. I tested it, and that's a PNP. So this drives that. This is an NPN, it drives that, and this drives this, and this drives, which is again a PNP for the ground side, drives this thing. These posts here are the outputs. I see no DC on them, although actually I should test before the cap. So yeah, did some voltage measurements on the good side to see what I should be looking for, and that looks pretty weird to me as well. So transistor number 1, this is the left channel, which is the working one. Transistor number 1, and by the way, this is the one that got kind of hot. Transistor number 1, pin 1, which is base, 0.05 volts. Pin 2, which is collector, 16.2 volts, which that should be rail voltage. Pin 3, 0 volts, transistor number 2, which is this one over here. Base 17 volts, which is very weird. Collector 32.5, emitter 16.5. Right channel, transistor 1, which is this guy here. I labeled them weird because this is before I actually sort of figured out how it's set up more or less. So transistor 1, base 0 volts, collector 31.5, emitter 0 volts. Transistor 2, which is this guy right here, 31.5 volts on base, 32.2 on collector, and 31.2 on emitter. So obviously this to me, the right channel, this to me looks very weird. It looks like it's way off balance, and this could explain the heat and all that crap. This obviously, this one's dead right here, and obviously it's got its own issues. Very, very off balance. This has just got full voltage all over the place. So yeah, I went through this, I tested the transistors, they're all okay. I did find one that's bad, this one here. And the thing is, I'm not really sure what these 3 transistors do here. Well, I mean, this one's driving, this is a driver transistor for this. This one I assumed was, sort of like an idle current control. This one maybe like a pre-amplifier type of thing, maybe a phase inverter. I'm not really sure what's going on here exactly. I know one of these transistors must be used to help with this biasing stuff, so not really sure, but I did find that this one's bad. When I test from base to emitter, I get 1.4 volt drop, which I think might be indicating that this thing's open. you know, the 1.4 reading is coming from somewhere else in the circuit. I tested its twin brother over here in the circuit, and this one tests normally. So I'm gonna desolder this and figure out what's going on here. Yeah, so I just snipped the pin off of that thing, and it's definitely reading open from base to emitter. So now I need to figure out what I can use as a replacement for this thing, because these are weird little transistors. Let's see, what's that say? C734. So we're going to try and look that up for a replacement. Hopefully that's the only sort of issue with this thing on this side anyway. And I can just sort of, replace that and, not worry about something else might maybe cause that thing to burn out. So maybe I can just drop a new one in and not worry about it, and readjust the idle on both of these sides. Although I'm not really too sure how to do that on these things. By the way, okay, so I found a replacement for that transistor. Apparently the best replacement for those C734, I think it was, transistors is C1815, and I found one, put it in there. So I'm about to fire this up. I figured that the whole trick with this thing is, oh, sorry about the focus, is the voltage at the output before the cap is half the power supply voltage. So if it's 32, then it's 16 volts. I think maybe the adjustment here, one of the ways you can do it is maybe by turning it until you get, an exact halfway between the power supply voltage. I'm not really sure. But I got the multimeter hooked up to the output here before the cap. And let's see what it does. I'm about to power it up. Let's cross our fingers. Oops, wait. Oh, that looks promising. You see this flickering? I hear some arcing, and I think it's the power switch. But anyway, that looks pretty good. This transistor feels a little bit warm. On the other hand, the one over here doesn't feel warm. And this is actually climbing. Yeah, it's getting warm. Let me turn this off. So I wonder what the hell is up with that. And that was going beyond the halfway point. So let me see if I can figure this out. Sorry about the focus. Okay, so I compared voltages between this little transistor here that was getting hot and the one over there. It's equivalent. And this was getting 1 volt extra on the base, which comes from over here on this thing. So I somehow ended up coming to the idea to measure across the little adjustment pot, and I think those are gonna end up being part of the problem anyway, because these are marked 500 ohms and they don't read anything across. That one is the same, even though that one, that channel is supposedly working, it doesn't seem to measure anything as well. So these are definitely one of the problems. I don't know if that'll fix the circuit completely. So yeah, that was getting a little bit of extra voltage, and now that it's removed, I compared the two again, and they're both getting about the same voltages. This one for some reason gets a little bit more on its, I think it's the collector. So yeah, and actually right now you're hearing it. So let me try and turn this up. It sounds like that because of the lack of biasing. But okay, I'm gonna see if I don't think I have one of those trimmer pots, but I might tack like a regular potentiometer on there and see what happens. I still need to figure out how to set the idle current on these things though. So I think that'll be part 1, and I'll follow it up on part 2 and see if I can find some pots.